Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast this week. As always, great show. And before I introduce the guests, as always, please follow, subscribe, review, help grow the podcast 2022. We're going to go all in on this podcast and just bring on the best guests. And I hope you are going to be a part of it. As always, you can always support the podcast through Anchor, follow on Twitter, Instagram, subscribe on Spotify. We have a new website for the podcast, the genuinelyinterestedpodcast.com, where you can get all the news, information, everything in one website. So that's pretty cool. And I think that is all. So let me introduce this week's guest. This week I have Kenny Florian, a legend of the sport of MMA. He's been around forever. He was on the first Ultimate Fighter. He fought some absolute killers, and he's been around for a long time. You know, he has his hand in a lot of different facets of the game, from podcasting to commentating to post-fight analysis, podcast. He's got academies, just everything. He's a student of the game. He's a fan of the sport, and he's someone that is a lot of fun to talk to, learn from. And he's got, honestly, a lot of valuable insights that are transferable from martial arts to real life. So regardless if you're an MMA fan or not, you're going to love this podcast. You should stick around. You should listen. This is an awesome one. I've been a fan of Kenny for a long time, and I was happy to have him on the podcast. So I don't want to take up too much time with the intro. I'm going to go right into the episode, and let me introduce this week's guest, Kenny Florian, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the podcast.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
How you doing, Kenny Florian?
Not too bad, man. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I've been watching you forever. It's almost it's a little surreal actually talking to you. It's kind of nice.
No problem, man. My pleasure.
So you recently moved, right? I think I heard you recently say that you moved. What kind of spurred that on? You've been in LA, right, for a very long time. What was behind that decision?
Yeah, I was in LA for about 10 years. Ended up moving to North Carolina. And, we had our second kid, and, things were getting a little bit crazy where we were living. We were in Venice, California, and, didn't feel like it was the best place to maybe raise a family, and, wanted to be a little bit closer to family. Both of our families are here on the East Coast. So it made sense from that standpoint, having a second kid, and, having a little bit more space and a little less craziness was kind of, at the heart of that decision. So, things have been good. We've been here since, I guess, April, and been loving it.
Hey, how are you adapting? You like the change? Because I recently moved from New York to Denver. In between was Connecticut. And dude, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I bet. I think a lot of people are kind of making a move from the big city into other, places. We love it. For my family, it's been great. And I feel like we can have, the kind of lifestyle we can do, kind of a lot of the nature stuff. But we're also like 15 minutes from anywhere we need to be, from like uptown, as they call it here in Charlotte, and kind of close to wherever. So it's, we kind of have everything at our fingertips. So we kind of have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I feel like if you can call it good, I feel like the one good thing COVID has done was opened people's minds, especially in like the big places, right? Like Chicago, maybe LA, San Francisco, New York, that there are other places to live, and you could probably even live better for cheaper and get more bang for your buck. So
yeah, definitely.
So you have academies though in California, right?
So I did. I had an academy in Los Angeles, but no longer a part of it now. Kind of left that behind, and been busy doing commentary stuff and work. So I really don't have a whole lot of time to run a gym or be a part of the gym on a teaching level. And it's kind of nice to be a student again and walk in and train when you can. Also, my back's been kind of hit or miss. So, when I'm able to train, I train as much as possible. And then sometimes my back prevents me from doing that. So it's been nice. It's been nice to kind of have that freedom to kind of go in and as a student, as opposed to kind of having to be at a gym. And there's a lot involved in that process. I still have my gym with my brother, Keith, in Boston called Florian Martial Arts Center. So still have my gym in the Boston area. Just kind of been focusing on that and all the other things I have going from commentary and the podcast and stuff like that. And
that's awesome that's available to people nowadays, right? You can create content endlessly. And you're an OG, martial arts has been part of your life forever. And now it's a sport. Now it's a job that you can make a living off physically from that, but also from all the periphery, all the stuff that's surrounding it. But 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. Like none of that existed, unless maybe you were a boxer or like WWE or something like that. But yeah, I guess what made you decide to get into MMA and what was your first martial arts of choice? And then also at the time, did you have the foresight? Did you think like, I could see something happen here. I could see like 10, 20 years from now, this being a big thing.
Yeah, I'll try to answer.
Sorry, it was a lot of questions.
Yeah. I'll do my best. I was at Boston College playing soccer, and I was, my brother called me and told me about this thing called the UFC, and how they pit style against style, and he told me about this skinny Brazilian guy who was beating everybody, and I was just fascinated by it. And I came from the perspective of, the best martial artist, the best fighter was the guy who could knock you out. And I always thought it was this jacked, scary dude who was like, just a beast. And I looked at Royce Gracie and I was so disappointed. I was like, this is the guy? It's like, this is the guy that everybody's afraid of. He's beating everybody. Like, how is he doing it? And I saw it. And I was kind of disappointed. I was like, wait a sec, this isn't what I've been told. Mm-hmm. This isn't the way, the martial arts movies have told us that this is supposed to go down. And I saw him do it again, and he beat all these monsters yet again. I said, well, geez, there's something to this. I got to try this. Maybe I can do it too. I'm kind of not the biggest guy in the world. Maybe I can do that. And I just, the first experience I had was a seminar with Royce Gracie in Westchester, New York.
Oh, wow.
And I just was obsessed with it from day one. And I was probably 19 or 20 years old at the time, still in college playing soccer. And, while I was playing soccer, like the only thing I could think of was Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I felt like I had this mistress on the side that I just couldn't, stop thinking about. And I was just fascinated with it. It was all I could think of. And when soccer season was over, I would just go all in on jiu-jitsu and do that until soccer season would resume. And, my original intent was just to do jiu-jitsu and learn and have fun. Then it led to me competing pretty early on, had some success there, kept competing in jiu-jitsu competitions. Ultimately, that was went from local in the Boston area to regional, more like East Coast, and then national competitions. And then, I would travel to Brazil for the world championships and things like that. So, my horizons got a little bit bigger, each time and kind of went for bigger and bigger goals. Ultimately, I still felt a lot of fear about getting in a fist fight against another trained martial artist. Like, how would that go down? Yeah. How would I do? How would I react? Would I allow my skills to go out and do their work? So I said, I want to try one fight. And then I want to try a second fight. I want to try a third fight. And then at one of those fights, Dana White, the president of the UFC, happened to be at one of my fights, told me about this show called The Ultimate Fighter, and wanted to invite me for an interview. I had actually lost that fight, and he was actually scouting out my opponent originally, who had a lot more fights than I did, was a lot bigger than I was. And, it was a war. It was back and forth war. I ended up losing a close split decision. I thought I won. He thought he won. And that's what gave me the opportunity to be on The Ultimate Fighter. And I was really, when I was on The Ultimate Fighter, I really was just a jiu-jitsu guy. I didn't have a whole lot of experience with striking and things like that. Things I did as a kid, or, someone would just show me randomly, but I didn't really have much striking experience. Like, I think I had like maybe a month of Muay Thai.
Really?
And I had gotten to the finals of the competition. I lost brutally in the finals of The Ultimate Fighter to Diego Sanchez in a weight class that was a couple weight classes above my weight. And it was above Diego's weight as well. He had a lot more experience than me, and I just folded under pressure. I felt like I was a deer in the headlights and didn't compete or perform the way I wanted to. And that was a big eye-opening moment for me, that not only did I have a lot of work to do technically, but I had a lot of work to do mentally and spiritually. Like, I knew that I needed to strengthen my mind and my resolve, and find ways to calm down and stay composed under pressure. And that became this, again, another obsession of mine of trying to hone in and perfect that process throughout my career. So I went from like, let me just try this MMA thing, to me losing, to me being, no, I can't go out like that. I got to chase this and get better at this, and give it my all every single time.
What do you think Dana was looking for at the time? Was he looking for characters, for personalities, for looks, for skills, for a combination of all them in one person? Like, because you said, like you said, it was a split decision loss.
Yeah.
He still picked you. So, like, what do you think was the thought process at the time? Because the UFC at the time wasn't as big as it is now. That was kind of
right. Exactly.
That was what made the UFC big.
Right. Yeah. And I'll answer that question. So I don't know. I'm sure he and the producers were looking for a mix of characters, like, I guess maybe I fit the role of, a guy who maybe didn't look like a fighter, who loved martial arts and, came in from that perspective. And then, everyone kind of fit a certain mold and was different than someone else. And
you're the good guy.
I guess maybe. And I think when you have all those different personalities in one house, you're going to get an interesting dynamic for television. So they really had a great recipe for season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter. And, as far as did I see potential? Absolutely. I saw a lot of potential both in jiu-jitsu and in mixed martial arts. And I said, if people really learn about this and get behind the fighters and understand our stories and learn about how tough this sport is from like a training perspective and learning perspective, that this could be the most exciting sport in the world. And I didn't think it would happen as quickly as it did. I wasn't even sure if The Ultimate Fighter season 1 was going to be on television. I'm like, who's going to watch this? But I knew there was potential, and man, it just blew up. And it was really a pleasant surprise, and it took time for that to happen, obviously, and get recognized by, some of the more mainstream networks like Fox and ESPN. But once that happened, it really was something that really launched this sport. And I'm happy to be amongst, I guess, not one of the early pioneers, but I guess one of the mid-tier pioneers of the sport.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, it's gone through an evolution. It was once considered by some politician human cockfighting.
Yes, exactly.
And it went to a legitimate sport. They made it legal in each and every state. And now it's, I think, the biggest or one of the biggest sports in the world. And the fighters are actual superstars. A lot of them can become very rich from doing this. And like we said, like all the other things that surrounding it, from podcast to YouTube to social media, sponsors, etc.
Yeah.
But and you're someone that's, you're a fan of the sport. Some can say a martial arts philosopher of sorts. Like, how do you see the process? What do you think? What would you credit, I guess, the explosion of popularity that's happened over the past 5 or 7 or 8 years or so?
I think it really comes down to investing in the sport and telling the stories of all the amazing fighters that are out there, and allowing those personalities to really come forth, and for fans to have an opportunity to see what happens when two awesome mixed martial artists get in the cage. And when that recipe is right, man, you get some of the best sporting events in the world. I mean, and now we're seeing it at a whole different level. Now there's so many more mixed martial artists out there. When I was fighting, I think there was around 200 UFC contracted fighters. Now I think there's like maybe over 600. So it's almost tripled in size.
Yeah.
There's way more weight classes. I feel like every weekend there's a UFC event. Now you have other events like, the PFL that I work for, which is on ESPN as well. You have Bellator. You have a bunch of these events, ONE FC. So you have a bunch of these events that are doing a good job of promoting the sport and that are looking for a high level fighters who are going to provide a lot of great entertainment for the fans. And, when you're able to provide that on major networks or have that, available for people to see, you're going to get fans. And, I think obviously the UFC is largely responsible for that, for building such a strong brand and, investing in the sport and things like The Ultimate Fighter. I think that really was a big catalyst for the sport.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not a big sports guy, but there's nothing more entertaining than a main event UFC fight. My body is like shaking. The adrenaline just coursing through my veins. I'm like, how are they doing it? I'm about to faint. How are you doing this in front of X amount of millions of people across the world? No problem. Just steady hand. Meanwhile, I'm about to faint on my couch.
Yeah. I think that it's such a delicate balance, right? Because you want to train like it is the most important thing ever. But at the same time, when it comes to fight night performance, all that almost you want to delete out of your memory and out of your mind. The most important thing is that person in front of you and the kind of exchanges that you're going to have in that moment. So staying as present as possible and not getting ahead of yourself. I think that was what really, one of the reasons that led to my demise on the finale of The Ultimate Fighter Season 1 was I was thinking about all the fans and family that were watching my fight. I was thinking about, the fact that there was a 6-figure contract on the line. I was, thinking about how hectic it was back there. There was so much going on that I almost just couldn't slow it all down. It was all moving so fast. And it got the better of me. I got interested or I let my mind get distracted by all this stuff that really doesn't matter. None of those things happen if I'm not able to go out and do my job the way I trained to do it. So being able to be in the moment and talk your heart rate down and to do something as simple as breathing. Like, you think about, like what you're talking about, getting so excited, as a fighter. And I see it so many times. I've seen big names in this sport, awesome fighters in this sport, literally break down and cry backstage because they're so nervous before they go out. And, really? It's like, and that takes courage, right? It's like, courage is when you do something and you still have that fear and you still have that hesitancy. Like the ability to go out and do it under composure is something that has always fascinated me. I've been always interested in the master aspect of martial arts. Like to me, a master is the furthest thing away from a person who's doing martial arts on their first day. The first time you do martial arts, you're nervous, you're tight, you're rigid, you're awkward, you don't really know what's going on. You're looking around, you're not very present, you feel self-conscious. The master is the opposite of that. Super relaxed. They make it look easy. They make it look like they've been doing it their whole lives. They have little to no expression on their face. It's like, just like they're walking on the park. And, that has been my lifelong goal. And I'm not sure I'm there yet, but I'm certainly trying to get closer to that aspect every single day. That's something that's always fascinated me.
Yeah, it's an endless pursuit of excellence. But my coach always used to say the hallmark of someone who's great at something is how easy they make it look. And
right.
The easier they make it look, the better they are at it.
Yes. No question about it. Couldn't agree more.
how much do you think because you were talking now about a lot about the psychological aspect. Most fighters, I'm assuming, I don't know each and every one, but a lot of the training is physical, right? You're doing pads, you're doing sparring, you're doing strength and conditioning, all the other stuff, and maybe not enough in mental. How much do you think in your like percentage wise, like how much is, or maybe they should be invested in the mental game as well?
It's tough for me to pinpoint and give you a percentage, but I'd say it's much bigger than we think. And the reason I say that is because, the technical and the physical leads to the mental, and then the mental also, there's like this feedback loop of mental, physical that kind of feed off of each other. So I think they both play a role and there's an intimate relationship there. But I think something as simple as learning how to breathe and perhaps a practice in meditation and being able to process and bring all of you in the moment in everyday life, not only in your training and when you're performing, but in conversations that you have with people and, actually listening as opposed to just, already having something in your mind that you're going to say, like little things like that it's all part of the dance of life. And I think all of those little experiences allow you to let that play out in bigger experiences and vice versa as well. So, the mental aspect is huge. I remember reading a lot about special operations forces and found a lot of inspiration in what they do. I'm just walking into a cage with a referee, and if things go bad, the referee gets to save my life. Out on the battlefield, that isn't the case. Your life is on the line. You have your buddy in front of you and behind you that their lives are on the line, and you got to get it right, or else people die. And I thought about, what is the mentality of someone who has to do that? And if I can mimic some of that, if I can learn from them, I can then apply it to my own life. And I read a lot about samurais, the samurai as well, and how stoic they were. I found a lot of inspiration in a lot of the past battles throughout history and generals and in their approach, and learned a lot in that process. And that was super helpful, reading about figures like Musashi and some of the ancient martial artists like Jigoro Kano and their philosophies, Bruce Lee, of course, all these people who laid the foundation for us was huge in my influence. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, and learning from them, learning from a lot of the past greats, like the Gracie family and what they did, and a lot of the other great champions of the past, and seeing what they do and how they operate and what works and what's not. It's so valuable.
I've been both, maybe not at the highest levels, but I've been on, I was a soldier, so I've been in the battlefield, and I've also had fights. I've had maybe, I don't know, not a lot, but 15 amateur, semi-pro, you could say, Muay Thai fights, maybe a little more.
Yes.
And I'll be honest, the Muay Thai fights, I think, were scarier.
Really?
I think so. And I'll tell you why. It's not necessarily because I was afraid to get hurt. I think it was when you're part of a team on the field, it's
right.
You feel there's an ease. Like I know these are my brothers. We've trained together. I am part of a team. They have my back. When I was in the ring, it's just me. And again, it wasn't even the fear of getting hurt. It was, I think for me, it was like the embarrassment, like to get knocked out or hurt in front of other people. That was something that I was so scared of. And I think that was why the first, I don't know, few fights, I would barely move. I would just be like, just tight the whole time. Cause I was like, I just don't want to be embarrassed.
I think that's fair. And I think that's accurate. I think it is very different because, I played, soccer at a pretty high level throughout my life. And I also felt like, it's easy to go, the goalkeeper, he screwed it up, or, why didn't that guy give me the ball, or, that guy messed up a pass or whatever. It's easy to hide in there. And you also have the comfort of having some other people that are motivated around you that are also going to protect you. I'd much rather go in with numbers on my side than go in by myself. And I think knowing that you're all out there alone. Sure, you have your coaches, you have your training partners, you have your cornermen, all that stuff. But once you're in the ring, man, once you're in the cage, it's just you out there. There's no one else to blame. It's like all the work is done and there's no running out of there, and that I would agree with you is a scary thing. And you have to be able to face yourself. And I think that's so much a part of it is like, when I was in the Ultimate Fighter finale, I remember I beat myself. I felt like even when I fought BJ Penn, I had him on such a pedestal that I felt like, I'm good, but I'm not like BJ Penn, man. Like he's a world champion, jiu-jitsu black belt, world champion, UFC fighter. Like, I don't know. Like I held him here and I had myself here. And how do you win that way?
Yeah.
How do you win? Like it's a very difficult thing. So those little mind games of getting over the hump and believing in yourself and also being at ease with the lack of control, I think is huge. And learning that takes time. And it's a wild process.
So when fighters say, sometimes after fights, you'll hear fighters say, I beat myself tonight. He wasn't better than me. I was not myself. And,
Right.
It could happen. Like maybe something happened to your family, or maybe a loved one left you, or there's so many things that happen to us in real life. Like, like how much water, because sometimes it could be the fighter just saying that, it's their ego, it's bruised. I don't want to say that he was better than me, but then other times that could really be the case.
Yeah, sometimes it is. And that's not the only case for me against BJ Penn. BJ Penn, I thought was a better wrestler. I thought his jiu-jitsu was better. I thought he had better boxing. So, yeah, I mean, that's only a part of the story. So absolutely. But sometimes it is like, it's you can only do so much on the technical side.
Yeah.
But on the mental side of things, you have to be whole with yourself. You have to be at 100%. And I think it's like, conversely, we know on fight night, the best fighter doesn't always win.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, how does that happen? Sometimes it's mistakes. Sometimes it's a bad referee decision. Sometimes that guy believed in himself and went out there and was determined to win at all costs. Mm-hmm. And that mindset could have been the difference. And sometimes if you're not all the way there and you're doubting yourself, like that's not a great place to be, So yeah, it's about getting all those different ingredients, right and at the right time. And that is a very difficult thing, I think, for a lot of professional athletes, not just mixed martial artists.
So I want to ask you a question that I personally, I don't feel is talked about enough. You retired, I think it was around age 34, right?
Let's see. Yeah. So 2011. So 10 years ago. Yeah. About 44, 40. So I'm 45 now. I was about 34, 35 years old. Yeah.
Okay. And then we see guys fighting into their mid 40s now. And I think that decision to retire, I mean, again, it's individual. Some people, maybe they're 34 is some other person's 42, but I see people fighting way past their prime, and you can see that. You can see them losing, loss after loss after loss, after concussion, after knockout, and after a while you don't want to see it. You feel bad, and I just wonder, why do you think they're fighting way past their prime to the detriment of their own mental and physical well-being? Like, do they not have good people in their corner? Like, I don't know. What's the reason, do you think?
I think there's a variety of reasons. I think one of them is we find our identity in what we do oftentimes. Yeah. And it's like, if I'm not fighting, who am I? And that can be a scary thing for people, and they end up going way past their prime. The other reason is, it could be economic. Like, geez, I need the money. I got to do this. This is the only thing I know. In some cases, maybe you're not having the right people around you to tell you what they truly think. So it's tough. Sometimes it's pressure. It's pressure from the organization. It's pressure from, your family. It's pressure from your coaches. It's pressure from your training partners to go out there and, still do it or still perform, or you feel like people aren't going to like you. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. But I think one of the main reasons, I think, is in retiring, you're saying goodbye to a large piece of yourself. And I think that's scary for a lot of people, especially if you don't have the ability to have a backup plan. And when we're younger, we don't really think about the future too much, for better or worse. We like to think we're invincible, and that can help us, especially as a fighter. But also, you tend to only think of the now and don't plan for the future. And, how many times have we heard the story of not just in mixed martial arts, but the professional athlete in general who had millions of dollars and, a couple bad investments in restaurants, and now they're broke again, or something silly. And you're like, man, that's horrible. So that does happen. And it's sad when it does happen. But I guess it's part of learning, part of life, and setting yourself up and your family to hopefully have some kind of a future past fighting.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be difficult when your whole identity is wrapped up in this person, and you're so used to the admiration, to people coming up to you and saying you're amazing, you're great, we love you. And I'm assuming like fight week is probably so addictive, like all the fans and adulation and the press and, constant social media, patting you on your back. And to give all that up to all of a sudden not have that is, that I could see how that could be difficult.
I think that's a great point as well. That kind of influence and that kind of circle that you have around you, for better or worse, could, excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. Could influence you in a certain way. And, the fans are great. I think we should all be appreciative of the fans and the people that, look up to us and stuff like that. But, if you put too much weight into that as well, you start to have others kind of define who you are. And also, conversely, it's like, I had a lot of people that liked watching me fight. I also had a lot of people who wanted to see me lose or who didn't like me for whatever reason. So if I put a lot of weight into the people who love me, I could also be putting a lot of weight into the people that hate me too. And like, that's not real either. So like, it's just about staying as centered as possible and, believing in your path, believing in yourself, and trying to be as authentic as possible, and having something deeper than just going out there to please the fans. I think that can run out very quickly because, as we know, people are very fickle, right?
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Was there ever a point after you retired that you thought about going back, or maybe tempted for like a specific fight, or maybe they dangled like, oh, if you come back, this big paycheck is waiting for you, something along those lines?
Right. Yeah. I retired. I injured my back, training. And, again, I had injured it before, but it was like the final straw. And I was like, man, like I always said, if I wasn't physically able to train the way I wanted, I knew it would be time to hang it up. And thankfully I had, a UFC commentary job at the time. I had, a job with Fox Sports that was offered to me. So I had something after fighting. But I think, if I'm being honest, I thought, hey, maybe my back gets better in a year and a half, couple of years. Maybe I come back for one more. I get a big fight or something and have that chance to go out there and do it. But it never really came. My back has been, this roller coaster ride since then. And it's been tough to really be at 100%. I'm not sure I really ever have been. It's been very painful training and things like that. But it never came to fruition. But I'm probably glad because to go through a training camp and not feel 100%, or to go out and not be able to perform the way that you want in a fight is a very dangerous thing. The sport is brutal. The guys are getting better and more dangerous all the time. Yeah. And if you are not, at least able to move the way you want and train the way that you want, I put a lot into my training. I invested a lot in my training. I put a lot of hours into my training. And if I wasn't able to put forth that huge effort, I was going to get hurt. I'm not the biggest guy. I'm not the strongest guy in the world. I didn't want to put myself in that position.
Yeah. And I want to touch on, we talked about the mental game, and I want to touch on one more thing. Is there something about fighters who are undefeated and then lose and then they just, or let's say maybe they're on a really long win streak, not necessarily undefeated, but either a really long win streak or undefeated. And then they go and they lose. And they're not able to come back. Like they never regain that win streak, and they just keep either losing all the time or win, loss, like just something changes there. And you can see that with Jose Aldo, Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman, Tony Ferguson, Thomas Almeida. There's just the list is endless. So again, just to touch on the mental game, like what do you think? Is there something that just snaps there? Like, because the physical abilities are the same, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, and so much of life is paradoxical. I think about how one of the best tools you can have mentally is to believe that you can't be defeated. One of the worst tools you can have is to believe that you could be undefeated. Because once that happens, you go, "Oh my gosh!" Their whole world crumbles now because they were under the illusion that they could not be beaten. And I think one of the most powerful things to remember, I think, is to know that you can be defeated, to know that you are human, to know that you can be knocked out, to know that you can be submitted. And, as fighters, we're very prideful, we're very proud. And I think that you can't let that affect your ego so much. You have to look at it in regards to, am I getting better as a fighter? Am I improving as a martial artist? What is my goal here? Is it to be famous? Is it to be rich? Or is it to be, the best martial artist that I can be? And if you can do that, I think it refocuses you, and you don't get caught up in all the other BS that you kind of tell yourself or that other people tell you. It's like, never believe when someone says you're the greatest, and never believe when someone says you're terrible. Like, you know what I mean? Both things can be really harmful. You just have to be true to yourself and work hard at whatever it is that you're doing.
So never believe your own hype. I think it was Tyson that said that, right?
100%. Exactly. For better or worse, never believe you're terrible. Never believe you're the best. It's just like, stay humble, keep working. There's a lot of people out there working hard to take your spot. Just keep at it.
Yeah, there's so many amazing up and coming fighters right now in the UFC. It's ridiculous. And in general, in MMA. Which I guess that's a good segue to my next question. How do you feel about some of the hyperbole or the over promotion or hype at times that, certain fighters receive versus others? I feel like sometimes they're quick to jump on a hype train after maybe a fight or so, or label someone as the greatest ever when the stats actually don't back it up. So is it a cult of personality? It's a popularity contest. And I get it. It's entertainment. It's a business. You got to promote people. You got to put butts in the seats. You got to sell pay-per-view. But, is there a line in your opinion?
I think it's an excellent observation. And it's something that I get a little tired of, but also know that I could be susceptible to it myself. And, it's easy to become, enamored with the latest and greatest, but sometimes it's warranted. Sometimes we're just straight out wrong. But other times we become influenced. And I think we do live in this world of hyperbole and exaggeration. And, it's like everyone's always looking for the greatest ever, or the greatest of all time. And it's like, man, let's let that marinate a little bit. Let's wait. Let's wait till we actually start saying those things. Let's let it take some time. And, obviously it's a way of selling pay-per-views or selling a certain fighter, but many times we are very quick to do that. And what it does is it kind of distorts the signal. It distorts the communication. It distorts everything around us now, because it's like, if everything's the greatest, then where the hell do we start? Where are we now? We just become lost in all the kind of silly talk.
If everything's the greatest, nothing's the greatest, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's when everyone was starting to during COVID, everyone was a hero. Like the UPS guy was a hero. The people working in Amazon were heroes. I'm like, dude, if everyone's a hero, there's no one's a hero. Like,
exactly.
Like we can appreciate you without calling you a hero.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. 100%.
What do you make of fighters starting beefs on social media? It's I like it. I think sometimes it's I don't know, it's a little played out at times, but if it's done right, I feel like it's nice. But it seems like a lot of fights just kind of get made over Twitter nowadays.
Right. Listen, I think it certainly gets fans on board, right? It gets people interested. Who doesn't like drama? Especially when it comes to being settled by throwing fists and feet. So I think it helps to sell fights, right? But I think there's so many people that are trying to be Conor McGregor and just aren't that. Like Conor is very good at doing that and making it real and making you hate him and selling fights and stuff. And but the reality is not many people are Conor McGregor, man. Some people are really good at it. Some people aren't. And I get it. You want to, get some practice in and stuff like that. But if you're not good at it, just stop. Just stop. You're going to put too much pressure on yourself, or it's just going to sound corny or cheesy or, cringe, and people aren't going to want to watch the fight. So there's got to be a certain amount of authenticity related to it. I get sick of it a lot of times, but sometimes, it makes the fight juicier, So I guess it depends on how it's sold and how it's presented.
Yeah, sometimes, especially with the European fighters who, English isn't their first language, some of that trash talk just goes south quickly. It's so cringe. So you brought up Conor McGregor. What do you make of his current situation, right? He has, I think off the top of my head, one win in 155 since 5-6 years, something like that. He's got an issue, obviously, with his leg. He's not going to be fighting for a long time, but he's still trying to stay relevant on social media, like you said, and he's throwing shade in everything that moves. And I personally, I don't want to, I think the guy's amazing. I think he's done a lot for the sport. Personally, I don't think he's championship material at 155 anymore. I think he could still put on amazing fights, and he could maybe even fight at 170. He can put on amazing fights, but I don't know if he can still get that belt, like you said, with the talent that exists out there. And if he keeps losing, that kind of puts him in a weird predicament, right? What do you make of his whole situation right now?
Yeah, listen, I think certainly the sport has evolved a lot and it's moving so fast. There was a point where I thought Conor McGregor was way ahead of what everyone else was doing. I thought that he had a style, a demeanor, a mental approach that was far beyond a lot of fighters during his time when he came into the game. Now he, a lot of people have mimicked and stolen a lot of what he's done. And that is a guy who has elevated the game in general, right? He's elevated the game on a technical level. He's elevated the game on a financial level. He's elevated the game as far as, who watches the sport now. He's brought in so many fans. So Conor will always be a legend no matter what happens moving forward. Yeah. He is in a very difficult spot right now. And I think, what does he need to do? More than anything else, he needs to get back to moving ahead past everybody else. He needs to inject something different, something new, some new wrinkle to his game that it's going to allow him to be the creative and dangerous martial artist that he is. Now we know what Conor likes to throw. We know what he likes to do. We know his tendencies. We know his vulnerabilities. This is what makes it so difficult to defend your belt in mixed martial arts time and time again. That's why it's so impressive when you see a guy like a Kamaru Usman or, George St. Pierre, the Anderson Silvas, Khabib Nurmagomedov, where it's exactly what he's going to do and you can't stop it.
Yeah.
That is someone who's also very special. So, I think the main ingredient or the main driving force behind Conor McGregor's success, in my opinion, is his creativity and was his unpredictability. Now we know what to expect. We know what Conor likes to bring into the octagon now. And I think that's going to be a hurdle for him. And if you're not training all the time, like let's say you're busy doing other things, or if you're injured, you have a major injury and you can't hone your craft or bring new stuff to your craft, well, now you're in trouble. So yeah, we've seen it on major in major military battles, even ones with awesome technology, with superior technology. If you can throw something different into the fold, even though you may not have the same amount of money or resources, you can be a major problem. Why? Because it's different, it's unique, it's something you're not used to. And I think Conor needs to bring something different now. And if there's someone who can come back and do it, I think it would be someone like a Conor McGregor. But I don't know. We'll see. I also think that, and I don't know Conor. I don't want to speak for him, but I also think that he largely has achieved what he already set out to do, and that was to become a multi-millionaire. He wanted to be the biggest name in the world and be the richest fighter in the world. He's already done that. So now it's like, where do we go from here? And maybe that's still his goal. Maybe he doesn't care about being a champion. Maybe he's like, I just want to go out there and make money, man. I want to be the biggest show in town. And if that's the case, he's doing that and he's successful beyond, any measure.
Yeah. And I guess that's my point. Like, all his businesses are tied directly to him, right? The whiskey, the clothing line, all the other endeavors that he's invested in. If he starts losing, and again, I don't see how he comes better after what happened to his leg. It was horrific. And if he starts losing, the name, his stock starts to go down. And how long can he sustain that? I don't know. But if he leaves the game now, he still kind of leaves on top. He's massive. You can blame the leg on whatever. And, he keeps on with, he's an entertain. He can be in film. He can do so many things, right? He's a character. He's a unicorn. But if he keeps fighting and keeps losing, his stock goes down. Potentially his business can go down because they're directly tied to him. So I just don't know if it's a good financial direction to go in for him.
Yeah. I think there's some truth to that. He's kind of at a crossroads a little bit. And, just coming back from an injury like that, breaking your tib fib is no joke. That is not easy, not only on a physical level, but also on a mental level. What is his approach, to blocking a kick now? What's his approach to kicking with that leg? Is he going to do it full on? Is he going to be 100% confident that bone is going to hold up? That takes time from training and believing in it, wearing the shin pads and knowing, okay, my leg is going to break. What happens when you take the shin pads off for the first time and you kick someone in the head? Are you going to do it with that same kind of vigor and force that you're used to? So there's a lot of question marks. But, Conor McGregor is one of the strongest, mentally toughest athletes I've ever seen. I mean, let's go back to Anderson Silva when he broke his leg, or let's talk about when Chris Weidman broke his leg. We never saw their face. We never even saw them leave the octagon. The camera left. They were in so much pain that they could barely even get on the stretcher to leave the octagon. Conor McGregor, and I'm not saying this is like, oh, Conor McGregor's tougher, but just to give you an example of the kind of toughness that he has, he gave a damn interview with a broken leg, a tib fib. He's lying up against the cage with a broken, like a compound fracture, giving an interview to Joe Rogan. Like, you just don't see that. Like,
he's a maniac.
The composure and the toughness, and to do that is amazing. And that's just like a small sample of Conor and how much of a unicorn he is. So. I've always been entertained by him. I had my eyes on him before he was even in the UFC. I was lucky enough to call his UFC debut.
Well, you were there when 50 G's was born, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I wish him the best, and it's just been unbelievable to see what he's accomplished in this sport. And but he certainly has a tough road to climb here, coming off of this injury and dealing with these losses that he's had.
Yeah. I mean, I hope to see him back. He's amazing. And like you said, his toughness is next level. I don't know how he does. The only other person I can think of something similar is when John Jones was fighting Chael Sonnen and he completely ripped his toe off. And barely even noticed it, I think, until Joe was like, dude, your toe is disconnected. He was like, oh, that was the only one. Yeah.
Yep.
So you're a massive fan of the sport, obviously. I have two questions. Who,
Okay.
who's someone that if they're fighting, other than Connor, but who's someone when they're fighting, it's like there's no way you're missing their fight.
I'm a big fan of Israel Adesanya. I love his style. I love watching him fight. I think he really is an artist when he performs. I love to see him compete. There's a lot of guys, Brandon Moreno is one of those guys who's a lot of fun to watch, and to see where he came with his first fight in the UFC to where he is now. It's amazing to see that kind of improvement. My buddy Ryan Hall, I love watching him compete. Anyone who has shown huge improvements, or anyone who I think is an artist in the game, is someone that I'm really intrigued by. Now, he's an artist of violence, but Justin Gaethje is one of those guys that, when he shows up to fight, he's going to give it his all, and he's willing to leave his life on the line, or put his life on the line to get a win. Like, he is an absolute savage. I don't think he's ever been in a boring fight. And, he's another guy that I will always watch. And I think he's a big superstar because of that.
Yeah. As Johnny Anik says, must see TV.
Yes.
Who are 2 or 3 people that you're maybe really bullish on that you think are future world champs?
Oh, well, let's see here. Man.
If there are any.
Yeah, I think Pereira at 185 pounds is going to be really, really interesting, because, you look at what Adesanya was able to do, and Pereira, has even bigger credentials, obviously has beaten Adesanya. I think that's going to be really interesting going forward. Phenomenal striker, I think, with a lot of potential. Let's see, who else? It's so hard to predict who's going to be the next big thing. I have a hard time with it. Let's see here. I'm trying to think. Why am I blanking? Yuri Prohaska. Yuri Prohaska is a guy who, at 205 pounds, is a really interesting challenger for Glover Teixeira. I'm fascinated by him as a character and as a martial artist. I think he has loads of potential. I think he has a lot of work to do with his grappling, his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu. But as a striker, as a tough individual, I think he's got a lot of potential. So I'm curious to see how he develops as well. It looks like he's got a title shot coming up. So, maybe he's not on the early stage of his career at this point, but he really is. I mean, he only had a few fights in the UFC. But already going to be fighting for the belt here. So, really amazed by what he's done in a short amount of time in the UFC.
Yeah, there's been an injection of talent in the light heavyweight and heavyweight divisions as of late, and I think they've become a little bit more exciting than maybe they used to be a couple of years ago.
No question.
So what do you make? You mentioned Gaethje, and there was obviously the fight him and Chandler, and there was Yair Rodriguez and Holloway.
Yes.
And there were both fights where there was no real loser. I mean, everyone, either their stock stayed the same or just elevated or increased. Is that a good rule for fighters to try and maintain? Give it your all in every single fight, abandon the playbook, go just, phone booth fighting, gruesome, because the fighters who are not exciting, if they lose a fight or 2 or 3, they can easily get cut. But a fighter that's exciting, they can lose 4 or 5 and still stay in the UFC. But I don't know, is there longevity in that?
I'm not sure. It's tough to say. I think everyone's longevity is different. Some guys are made to take a punch. However, that eventually runs out. You can only take so much damage. I mean, you look at Tony Ferguson. And how he was known to have the most amazing chin ever. Chuck Liddell was known to have an insane chin until he didn't. These things run out. We only have so much time. It's like the energy bar in the video game, except it never goes back up to full power when you've been in a bunch of wars. So, that's the problem. So you got to think, all right, well, what am I trying to do here? Am I trying to make as much money as possible in a short amount of time? Well, I'll engage in these kind of fights, but I'm not going to have a 40 fight career.
Yeah.
So you'd say like I limit to 20, and after that I'm done, because like Justin Gaethje, I think he's talked about this. I don't think he expects to be fighting for that long. He wants to fight for a short amount of time. He knows that his style is such that he can't keep doing this like that. But there could be, better economic reasons to do that, to have that style. The other thing you could say, it's like, all right, let's say you're exciting, but now you're 0-5. The UFC is going to cut you. I don't care how exciting you are. If you're 0-5 and you're not beating like top level guys or fighting top level guys, you're out, period, gone. So, and the reality is it's basically how much time you're willing, to do this for, how much money you think is worth it, and how much you value your brain and your body. It's like, I don't know, for me, and again, maybe it's because I was forced to. I wasn't the most powerful guy in the world, but I also knew that I didn't want to damage myself to get a result.
Yeah.
The goal for me was to damage and not get damaged. Right? That's what I think elite fighting is in my mind, anyway. So not to say I always did that. I certainly took some damage in fights, but my goal was to never just sacrifice my body to get a win. And we have one brain, and we've seen football players, mixed martial artists suffer from a lot of these damaging incidents over the years, and everything from CTE to Parkinson's to all these other things, nerve damage, neck and back damage, all these things could change us irreparably. Yeah. And we have to recognize that we are human, and we can suffer from a lot of damage from doing this sport.
All right. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you one more question. This year you joined the PFL broadcast team, and yes. Well, I guess first, how has that experience been so far?
It's been awesome. I think that the PFL is great. I love the way that it works. It's very much a meritocracy. It's not based on, politics or, talking trash. The only way you advance, the only way you get your opportunities is by winning. And I think that's what the sport is all about. So I love that they're doing something different. I love the tournament format. It's been fascinating to watch. I think it adds a lot more drama, and you get to follow from the beginning to see how things develop. And we've seen a lot of surprises last year. So I've been having a blast. They've treated me really well. The fighters have been a lot of fun to watch. So it's been a fun process.
And do you think there's obviously room for other promotions because they are coming up, right? There's PFL, Bellator, One Championship, but UFC still the holy grail. Do you think it'll ever kind of even out? Like maybe they'll all be roughly the same size, or is the UFC just so ahead of the game?
It's possible. Certainly the UFC has, the biggest brand and the brand that has been in the game the longest. They generate so much money at this point. So it's going to be tough to catch them. But I think the big mistake is to try to mimic what the UFC is doing. That's why I think, the PFL is taking the right approach and doing something differently. I think to try to do what the UFC, to try to do it on that level is going to be tough. But I think that the talent is going to really start to come over to the PFL as well. I think things will balance out a little bit because, if I'm a fighter and I'm good, I may not get a shot for the UFC World Championship. Yeah. I could be one of the best fighters in the world. And, look at the guys at 145 pounds, 155 pounds. There's so many great fighters at 135 pounds. There's guys that may never get a shot to fight for the belt just based on the way things go. And that's crazy. Now, you can go into the PFL and go, wait a sec, let me do the math here. I could fight for 12 years in the UFC and maybe never get a shot at the belt, or 8 years, whatever it is. I could maybe get $1 million in 1 year or in 2 years of like grinding and working hard and doing well in the tournament. from a financial standpoint,
Yeah.
that's intriguing. And I think for a lot of people, they're going to start to kind of really do that math and think real hard about that. Go, wait a sec. Should I just go into the UFC right now? Or maybe I can go into the PFL, build up my resume, make a bunch of money, and then maybe go somewhere else. So it really adds a new wrinkle. And I think we're seeing a lot of high level fighters come over to the PFL for that reason. You can make some really good money and face some great fighters in the PFL now. So, I think same goes for Bellator. That money incentive is big.
Yeah. I mean, options are good. You never want to have a monopoly in any industry. You always want to have a lot of options and just, I don't know. Yeah. Be a free agent or see what the options are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kenny, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for your time today, man.
My pleasure, man. Great talking with you. Where
are you most active? Where can people find you?
Let's see. So you can hit me up on Twitter at Kenny Florian. I got the same handle for my Instagram. I am releasing a jiu-jitsu instructional as well at kennyflorianmartialarts.com. That should be available soon. I'm excited about that. I kind of cover, conceptually how someone should approach the jiu-jitsu game from all the different positions. And, I'll be on BattleBots and Discovery Channel next year.
Nice.
And on PFL next year as well. And you can catch me on the Anakin Florian podcast.
Guys, go check all that out. It's all awesome content. And again, Kenny, it's been a blast, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.